Good morning. This is the introduction to our new unit. Unit 4 is called Saving the Mountain Lion, and you should have this introductory document in front of you along with two others that we're going to be using today. So as I read the text aloud, I want you to circle or highlight three details that are most important to the phenomenon being described. And then we're going to share out. So each person should identify the details that they circled or highlighted. So you're looking for at least three important details from the text as I read. The Connecticut cat. In the spring of 2011, there were several reports of a mountain lion around Greenwich, Connecticut. This was a surprise because mountain lions in the Northeast United States were eliminated by hunters several decades ago. In early June, the sightings were confirmed by paw prints, animal droppings, and photographs. And then, on June 11th, an SUV struck and killed a male mountain lion just on the Wilbur Cross Parkway, close to Milford, Connecticut, only 23 miles from Manhattan. Besides humans, mountain lions, which are also called pumas, cougars, and panthers, among other names, have the widest range of any mammal. Their historic range covered much of North America and all of South America. As human populations have expanded, especially in North America, the lion's range has been reduced. The map to the right shows the mountain lion range in North America. So it's interesting because, one of the questions is, where do they think this mountain lion came from? How did it wind up in Greenwich, Connecticut? How did it get so far from home? But anyway, you need to write down three important facts from the reading. You can share those facts with your group. You're going to be given 5 minutes to do that. And soon as your three things are written down, in 5 minutes, you're going to turn in your paper. So this is not something you're holding on to. And then we're going to start the next assignment. So you have 5 minutes. The sub will time 5 minutes starting now. Finish up your three ideas. You can talk to people in your group. Write down what you think is most important. And then turn it in. And then we're going to continue with the next document. Okay, so this is lesson 1 in Unit 4, Mountain Lion Populations. Our guiding question throughout this unit is, how can we use genetic data to determine where the Connecticut cat came from? So we're going to talk about karyotypes. So if you recall from your Unit 4 vocabulary, karyotype was on there. This is a complete, organized set of chromosomes of an individual's cells. So you know that you have 46 total chromosomes. You get 23 from your mom and 23 from your dad. And they line up in pairs. And when we look at a karyotype, it's really like a picture, right, of your chromosomes. And they're usually arranged by size and by shape. So that's a review of what a karyotype is. So you, by the time we're done, should be able to analyze patterns in genetic variation data from 5 different populations in North American mountain lions. We're going to be looking at data from California, Mexico, South Dakota, Texas, and Florida mountain lions in order to figure out where the Connecticut cat may have originated. So we're going to start by investigating genetic data. So remember, we're trying to figure out where the Connecticut cat came from. So what are some possible explanations for its origin that we have ruled out? So we have to name at least 2 explanations and why they are ruled out. So what they're really asking us to do in this question is, it's hard to believe that a mountain lion, right, would be near the city, right? So what are some other possible explanations that it could be, and why might we rule it out? Okay, so some people might think it was a bobcat. Okay, could have been one explanation, or maybe a wild house cat. So maybe it was a bobcat or wild house cat. And how can we rule that out? We can rule it out by physical characteristics, or more importantly, DNA analysis. It can be ruled out through physical characteristics or DNA analysis. So why is that important? Why is DNA analysis important? When you think about it, in real life, right, people have paternity tests done to make sure said child is really the child of a specific mother and father. What are they looking at? They're looking at DNA analysis. So that leads us to our next question. Why are we going to look at genetic data, and how is genetics helpful? So the genetic data helps us determine relatedness, right? Just as in a paternity test, or origin. What is going on here? It's not giving me my little square. Okay, so genetic data helps us determine relatedness and origin. So make sure you get that down. So by comparing the Connecticut cat's DNA to that of other mountain lion populations, we can find the closest match, and we can trace its geographic origin. So I'm going to say that again because that's important. That's what we're going to focus on. By comparing the Connecticut cat's DNA to that of other mountain lion populations, we can find the closest match and trace its geographic origin. So where did it come from? When we say geographic origin, that's what we're talking about. Okay. So below, you're going to look at 2 different karyotypes, or photographs, of the organism's chromosomes. The first karyotype is of a human male. The second karyotype is of a feline. Feline refers to cat, so it's a male cat. You're going to look over each karyotype and complete the data table below by recording, number one, the similarities in the karyotypes. So you're going to look for two similarities and you're going to write them in. You're going to look for differences. So two things, something that's only found in the human karyotype, and then something only found in the lion karyotype. And then we're going to see what questions you might have. So you're going to pause the video and you're going to do that now. We're going to give you about, I don't know, 5 minutes or so to do that because the karyotypes are not difficult to look at. So Ms. Gupta will time 5 minutes. Okay, you can work with somebody. You're looking for two similarities, then something only found in humans, then something only found in mountain lions, and any questions you might have. Okay, so you had your 5 minutes. Hopefully you wrote some things down. What are some things that you noticed that were similar between the two? What were some things that were similar between the two? Well, hopefully you noticed that in both of these, that they always come in pairs, right? If you look at chromosome 1, there's 2 chromosomes, or the first one. Number 2, there's 2, 3. Same thing down here. So they come in pairs. And if you notice, the last one is always XY. The last one is always XY. So that was some things that I noticed. One thing that you may not have noticed just by looking at this, but something that you should know is that I mentioned earlier that half come from the mother and half come from the father. So regardless whether you're a human or an animal, when you look at each of these, they come in pairs because one is from the mother, one is from the father. Some things that are different is that they have a different total number, right? We have a total of 23 here in the human, if we include the XY, which we do, and a total of 19 in the male cat. And what else? So there's fewer in the male cat than in the human. All right, so let's go up here and let's write some of this down. And you don't have, if you've got yours written down already, you don't have to write what I have. You should have written something down. So both occur in pairs. So that's number 1. And both contain an XY. Whoa, I can't type. There we go. And I'm going to move this down here, hopefully. Doesn't want to move. Why? Goodness gracious. All right. I'm not sure why that's doing that, but this belongs in the first box. This program always gives me a hard time. All right. Differences. Let's try to get differences. So difference is so only human, okay, has 23 pairs. I don't know why it won't let me move it. Has 19 pairs. Okay. And then some questions that we might have. So remember that the chromosomes contain genes. So one question we might have, are any of the genes on the male cat similar to those as a human? So are any of the genes on the male cat similar to those of the human? And another question we might have is, how does looking at the specific genes help us determine where the mountain lion came from? All right. Now I can move it. It won't let me move it after I've clicked on it. Okay. Well, I figured that out. So take a minute, and if you don't have to write what I wrote, okay? You don't have to write what I wrote. If you had your own information down, that's fine. If you need to add to it to make yours better, you can do that too. And then we'll continue. Okay, so you should have turned in your completed lesson 1 document to Miss Gupta. So you've got 2 assignments completed in 1 period. That's great. Before we start the next activity, Ms. Gupta is going to play a little video on mountain lions, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do next. Okay, so that was a little bit on the mountain lion. After seeing the mountain lion up close, I don't know how anyone would ever think that he could be mistaken for a wild house cat. Even if you had a Maine Coon cat, which is a big, big, fluffy cat, it still wouldn't be as big as a mountain lion. All right, so based on genetic evidence, right, we know that the cat's original population is from South Dakota. Well, you haven't discovered that yet, okay? But you're going to discover it. So why would the cat be found so far away from home? What would make it roam so far? So first of all, let's look at where this mountain lion was from. So here is South Dakota, way over here. So we're going to find out that this is where the origin of the mountain lion came from, okay? Where is Connecticut? Connecticut is way over here. So this is like, South Dakota is Midwest. It's like the middle of the country. And this is where the cat, the mountain lion, was seen. So I want you to think about that as we go through this next activity. So our guiding question is, why would the cat be found so far from home? What would make it roam so far? So we're going to read an article from the New York Times about the mountain lion's journey. And I want, as you read, record 2 concepts or ideas you have about why this cat traveled so far from its home. And you're going to record it in the graphic organizer below the article. So what I would suggest you do is, I'm reading. If you see something that makes you think that maybe that's why he traveled so far from home, I want you to put like a star by it, so that when I'm done reading, you can go back and grab that idea and write it down. Okay. From the beginning, the tale seemed to skirt the edges of the possible. A mountain lion reported to be stalking the wilds of Greenwich, Connecticut, seen near fancy private schools and busy roadways. But the sightings were confirmed in early June by paw prints, photographs, and animal droppings, and then more dramatically by a lean body of a 140-pound male creature killed by a sport utility vehicle on Wilbur Cross Parkway in Milford on June 11th. The aftermath was even more surprising. On Tuesday, in what state officials termed amazing news, they said that the Connecticut cougar had made its way east from the Black Hills of South Dakota, and that genetic testing matched samples of an animal confirmed as having been in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. So I'm going back to my map. I'm stopping for a minute. So we know that this is where the cat originated from. We know that this is where the cat wound up getting killed. We know that the cat was seen in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. So here's Minnesota. And here is Wisconsin. So you can see the cat is traveling east, right, toward Connecticut. This between Wisconsin and Michigan here, you have like a great body of water. So he might have come down, into Illinois and Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and come across. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing. But he definitely started in South Dakota, and he was sighted in these two. So let's go back to our story. So that means that the animal traveled more than 1,500 miles to Connecticut, more than twice as far as the longest dispersal pattern ever recorded for a mountain lion. The news stunned researchers trying to make sense of the first confirmed presence of the species in Connecticut in more than a century, in more than 100 years. Many believe that the animal must have been released or had escaped from captivity. Daniel C. Etzy, Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, said that the journey was a remarkable and positive reminder of the ability of wild animals to survive and adapt, but that there was no evidence that mountain lions were returning to the state. This is the first evidence of a mountain lion making its way to Connecticut from western states, and there is still no evidence indicating that there is a native population of mountain lions in Connecticut, he stated. But the finding may add at least a smidgen of mystery or paranoia to dozens of reports of similar creatures in Connecticut and the Northeast, most of them investigated and then dismissed as mistaken impressions. Before the animal was reported seen in early June in Greenwich, the last confirmed sighting of a mountain lion was in the 1800s. So remember, this happened in 2011, and the last sighting was in the 1800s. So that's more than 200 years no one had seen a mountain lion in Connecticut. Dennis Shane, communications director for the department, said that the development could lead people to wonder if there were other mountain lions, but that there was no reason to believe so. We've never seen any evidence of that, he said, and you can see that in other states where they do get mountain lions dispersing, they have evidence. They have a footprint, they have DNA. We never have any of that. There's been no evidence of them moving into the area except for this incident. The animal's origins were determined by genetic tests conducted at the United States Department of Agriculture's Forest Service Wildlife Genetics Lab in Missoula, Montana. DNA tests showed that tissue from the mountain lion killed in Connecticut matched the genetic structure of the mountain lion population in the Black Hills region of South Dakota. The lab also compared this lion's DNA to DNA samples from creatures found elsewhere in the country. The Midwestern DNA samples were obtained from droppings, blood, and hair found at locations where sightings of the animal were confirmed. That led to a match with DNA collected from an animal whose movements were tracked in Minnesota and Wisconsin from late 2009 through early 2010. DNA from the Milford lion matched DNA from a mountain lion at one site in Minnesota and 3 sites in Wisconsin. The path the mountain lion led biologists in Wisconsin to name the cat the St. Croix mountain lion, after the first county where the sighting was confirmed. The travels of the young lion, 2 to 5 years old and not quite full grown, are a familiar pattern called dispersal, in which young males look for mates, but officials said they seldom travel more than 100 miles. This guy traveled 1,500 miles. All right, so you need to record 2 concepts or ideas you have about why this cat traveled so far from home, and you're going to record them in this space here. Then you're going to share your ideas with other people in the room, and you're going to select one idea that is most relevant to answering the question, why the cat traveled so far. All right, we're not going to make a chart paper. We're just going to write it right here. So you're going to write down 2 ideas about why the cat traveled so far. Then you're going to you're going to share your ideas with other people in the class. And then you are going to pick, by consensus, the idea that you think is most relevant. I'm going to give you about 7 minutes to do that. Okay, 7 minutes to do that. And Miss Gupta will time you. And then we're going to come back. 7 minutes. Write down 2 ideas about why you think the cat traveled so far from home from the article. And then you're going to share with people at your table or other tables and pick one idea that you think is the best. Okay, so hopefully you've written down some ideas. Again, you do not have to have the same ideas that I have. Hopefully you at least wrote down one idea. The biggest idea and probably the strongest idea comes in the last paragraph, and that was dispersal, right? Which is looking for a mate. So that was the first thing that I came up with. And the second thing that I came up with, which really wasn't listed in the article, was that looking for food sources. So maybe where the animal lived, it was too populated and there was too much competition for food, so he could have been looking for food sources. The one that I think honestly is most relevant is the one that's listed in the article, which is the dispersal, looking for a mate. So that's what I came up with. In this last part, it says evaluate the evidence and reasoning behind the following claim. The Connecticut cat was originally from a population in South Dakota. We know that. It traveled to Connecticut based on the behavioral trait of male dispersal. Well, that was our biggest idea, or my biggest idea above, meaning it was looking for a mate. This trait could be beneficial because it would allow the cat to seek out a genetically different mate for sexual reproduction, meaning a mate that it was not closely related to him. So in our response, we have to be sure to include the strength of evidence, the weakness of the evidence, meaning what additional evidence would you want to collect or analyze to better establish a specific cause and effect relationship. Okay, so he did this to, get a mate, but like why? Where's the correlation there? Strength and weaknesses of scientific reasoning. Is there appropriate scientific reasoning that can link the evidence to the claim? And what additional reasoning would strengthen this claim? What counterclaims or additional critiques can you discuss? So this is tough, but this is the kind of things that you're expected to be able to think about, like on the Regents exam. So that's why we've been modeling and doing a lot of reading and analyzing, because the entire Regents exam is reading. All right, so let's look at these one at a time. So the strength of the evidence. I'd say, okay, so to begin with, I'd say that the strength of the evidence is low. And that's because if you go back to the claim, right, it says that the cat was originally from a population in South Dakota. It traveled based on the behavioral trait. There's no actual evidence stated in the claim. So the strength of the evidence is low because no actual data, which is evidence, is stated in the claim. Okay. What do we need, right? Weakness of evidence. What additional evidence would you want to collect to better analyze to better specifically establish cause and effect? So we need genetic evidence, right? We need genetic evidence. We need genetic evidence to establish cause and effect. Tracking evidence would also be helpful. Okay. So the next bullet, is there appropriate scientific reasoning that can link the evidence to the claim? Well, first of all, the concept of dispersal, leading the male to seek out a different mate, this is basically a strong biological principle, because survival of the fittest, getting genes that can strengthen your genetic line. So my third bullet is there is. So let's see. The scientific reasoning that can link the evidence to the claim is that dispersal is a strong biological principle, and this leads to increased diversity, right? Because you're now mixing genes, and therefore increases chances of survival. So by seeking out a mate that's not from his area and breeding with that female cat, you're going to increase diversity of the genes, which is going to increase chances of survival, and then passing those on to their offspring. Last bullet says, the other part of that question is, what additional scientific reasoning would strengthen this claim? So we would probably, I'm not going to write it, I'm just going to discuss it, but you would need studies to support this, that breeding outside your general area would increase the health of that genetic population over a period of time. So that's not something you can do in just one investigation. You would have to collect years of research. So what counterclaims or additional critiques can you discuss? So a counterclaim might be that the cat came from, maybe the cat came from a closer population. So we would have to prove that by tracking and genetics, the same thing that we're using. Or maybe the cat was transported by humans. So that's another possibility. Okay, so make sure you get that down. We are going to stop here for today, and you are going to bring this document back tomorrow, and we will continue.